This right here is the Simpsons Arcade cabinet from Arcade 1UP, and we've got to talk about the goods, the bads, and things that I think are alright about this thing. First off, I want to start off by saying this was sent to me by Arcade 1UP. However, this is not a sponsored video at all. I did all that stuff on my TikTok. But this is down to the nitty-gritty things I love about this, things I didn't love about this, and everything involved. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the cabinet itself, then we can get to the game. Starting from the ground up, first off, we do have the riser, which brings it up about a foot to a foot and a half, which definitely makes this thing more manageable. With being able to sit down and play this, you definitely want to have that riser, because if you don't, it's really short and it probably wouldn't be comfortable to play on. Next, we gotta talk about the fantastic artwork. This actually came pre-installed with the artwork there, and it looks really good. It even has the signature down below of the artist, and it just pops with the blue and the yellow accents. I really think they did a good job on the looks, but let's continue on. While we're down here, we've got to talk about the coin mechanisms. These things look very awesome, but they are indeed fake. The buttons, I wish these clicked in, or maybe you had an opening for the coin and it just dropped down below, but whatever that is, these things look really cool, and it kind of brings that aesthetic to you when you're playing an arcade machine. Moving to the control panel of the actual arcade machine, you've got 4 different positions you can use to play the Simpsons Arcade, and in the middle of all that, you also have the trackball for Simpsons Bowling, which is a ton of fun. But overall, I feel like this probably could have been placed a little bit better, because some of the placement of the buttons and the joysticks aren't really the best. And I did play this with 2 people, never got up to 4, but I think if you were having like 3 or 4 people play this at a time, it would definitely get a little cramped, because this is such a small machine. However, everything felt good when it came to the buttons and the joysticks. The trackball I thought was kind of okay. It feels a little cheap, to be honest with you. It makes a lot of noise, and it's just not what you want to hear when you're doing something like Simpsons Bowling and rolling that trackball. Now, yes, I understand what it is and everything, but it does sound rough, and so I'm not a big fan of that. Moving on to the screen, I actually think this thing looks really good for what it is. Normally, when you put an LCD screen in anything and play old games, it just doesn't look right, but I feel like this one looks pretty good for what it is, and realistically, all that stuff was already put together when you took it out of the package, so you didn't have to mess with the screen at all, which was a great thing. Moving on to the sound of the machine, I want to pause and let you at least be able to hear it for a minute. And to be honest, this doesn't have to sound great, but it does its job. There's 2 little speakers up underneath the marquee, and it sounds really pretty good for what it is. Now, could it be better? Probably, if you have a better system in it, but I think it sounds good enough for what it is. It's a small system, a small arcade, and I think it sounds good. It reminds me of what something would sound like if I was at the arcade, and this does a good job of that. And last but not least, before we talk about the games, we've got to talk about the marquee. Now, as you can tell, right down the middle is where the light is, and towards the middle it's brighter, and the farther you get towards the edges, the darker it gets. And I don't know, I think it could be better and could look definitely better, but for what it is, it did come together, built, pre-packaged when it came, so I didn't have to touch any electronics for that part, at least, thankfully. But I do think this could have looked a little bit better. Obviously, the Simpson logo looks great and the artwork, but I think the way that the light works could have been a lot better. Enough about the arcade cabinet as a whole. Now we've got to talk about the main reason you would want to buy one of these, and that is for the games. This system, as it sits, has 2 games on it. It's got the Simpsons Arcade game and then the Simpsons Bowling, which, if I had a choice, I'm going to play Simpsons Bowling a bajillion times more than I will play the Simpsons Arcade, but that's just me. I think both games are totally amazing, and now some people had issues with the Simpsons loading screen for the arcade game, but I didn't find that issue in mine. But I will say you can actually update the system. You hook it up to Wi-Fi and then it gets updates. So if anything does have a problem, it should be fixed by that. So I'm not too concerned about that myself. However, I do think the Simpsons Arcade is an amazing beat-em-ups game. It's totally fun, and I played through it and had a blast. Now, am I gonna go and play this every day? Probably not. But I did, for the first month of owning this, come in here and play the Simpsons Bowling every day. And to be honest, I wish I had scored a 300, a perfect game, but I never did that. I got one spare away from it, which was dumb because when you're playing the game, if you get 3 strikes in a row, it gives you an item, and the item ends up always screwing me, and I just don't do as well there. So that's one thing I don't like about the bowling game, is I wish that instead of getting a special item, you could like opt out of getting it, because that's ruined how I've played before, and it's just no fun. But overall, I think this is an awesome arcade cabinet. If you don't have a lot of space in your room, or maybe you don't have a ton of money to spend, these are definitely pretty awesome. To be completely honest with you, this was from the $500 bundle one, which includes the riser, the stool that I haven't showed you yet, and then also it has the metal sign, which you may think is pretty cool, but you may not ever use as well. But I think this is totally worth it. I've seen these at like Walmart and Sam's and Target, and they've always looked cool, but I've never bought one. But I'm glad this is the first one because it's totally fun. But I will say they do have these on clearance, and maybe Arcade 1UP wouldn't like me saying that, but I've seen these things on clearance, and that's totally amazing. If you can get it cheaper, I'm for that. So you guys know I always talk about trying to save money when collecting and all that. If you can find one of these on clearance, I say go out and buy it. If you can't, this is worth the money. It's a ton of fun, and you'll definitely enjoy it. Now, if beat-em-ups aren't your thing, obviously this one's not for you, but Arcade 1UP does have a bajillion different arcade cabinets. It's really hard to decide what you're gonna get. I'm thinking I might want to try to get that Mortal Kombat one maybe next, but I really enjoyed this thing, and I think you will like it too. But you gotta come into it thinking it's not a full-blown arcade cabinet. Obviously, you can see it's shorter. I'm sitting on a stool right now, which makes it perfect height. But if I was standing up, I would be way too tall, which is just not fun at all. But this thing will fit nicely over there off camera. Maybe I'll show it occasionally, but this was a ton of fun, and I think it's a system that if you've got the money and you're looking for something like this, you should definitely pick it up. But for now, I'm going to put it back in this corner, and I'm going to talk about some more videos. So go ahead and check that one out right there if you're interested. But overall, I really did enjoy this, and I've been playing it pretty much every day, at least turning it on and playing a round or two. I'm going to get out of here. Check out that video. Peace.